we are going to look at another local community. This video is going to show you something about a place called Vandergrift, Pennsylvania, in Westmoreland County. Slick and Shiny tongue-in-cheek productions are going to once more stumble our way through a maze of digital nonsense to let you find out something about a place in Westmoreland County. When I do these videos, I do now and then get surprises. And in doing this one on Vandergrift, I did get a surprise because I had no idea that the place was almost totally a registered historic district, registered with the Department of Interior in the United States Park Service. That's what we're talking about right there. Almost the whole town is an historic district. You've probably heard about historic sites, registered historic sites. Well, there are a couple historic sites there, but along the course of time, it was decided that the whole town nearly should be made into an historic district because of the great significance, which comes from the fact that the place was the first successful planned industrial town to be sold to the workers. That's one of the guys who were involved there. And as I say this stuff, I just want to mention that it was successful to the degree that a delegation from the British Parliament came to study it. And in the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, a model of Vandergrift was exhibited, and it won 2 gold medals. It was a really great example of how labor and management could get along together at a time when that was not happening near enough, because so often the attempts of management was simply to dominate and control the workers. And this resulted in a lot of resentment and bitterness, anger, strikes, and, hostile interactions. And the person responsible for this particular town turning out okay was a guy named George McMurtry, who had been working in a place in Apollo, which was just a couple miles upstream from where Vandergrift would be created. He was in charge of a steel plant up there, and he was having serious troubles with labor disputes, and also he wanted to enlarge the factory, and he couldn't do that because of the confinement of the factory where it was located. So it came about that George McMurtry convinced the people on the board that what needed to be done was the town simply needed to move. It was in Apollo, and so they needed to move downstream a little bit. They found 600 acres or so down there, and they bought the property. And in the year 1895, they hired a very important landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted, who was nationally famous, and he designed the town for them, designing the area where they would build the factory, and the place took off. In the next year, 1896, the place was opened up for sale to the people that they had to work for them. They began buying property, building their homes, and working in the factory. So what we're going to do is switch gears. What I want to do is push a couple buttons here, and we will get to look at. Now we see what we see here going on is that we have Pennsylvania, and in orange over here, this is Westmoreland County. And over here is a larger version of Westmoreland County showing exactly where Vandergrift will be located, okay? This is the Kiskiminetas River flowing into the Allegheny River. This is where Vandergrift will be created. And the reason you don't see anything over here, because the Kiskiminetas River is the boundary between Westmoreland and Armstrong counties. Now here it shows the whole picture. This is Apollo over here. This is where the story starts. This is where George McMurtry was in charge of a factory that was making galvanized steel, and they were running into problems here, and he convinced the board that they should move downstream, and that's what they did. They bought this property down here and built a new town and moved their factory. That's George McMurtry. That's the guy responsible for this project that turned out to be a great success. Now here's a guy who was on the board of directors of the factory. His name was Jacob J. Vandergrift. Now you know where the name Vandergrift came from. McMurtry didn't want to use his own name. He thought that Vandergrift would sound better for the name of a factory, for the name of a town. And so he named it after a board member and also a friend of his. Vandergrift and McMurtry were good friends. They got along, and they did a good job of putting together this town. Now here you see Vandergrift, and what you see is a large amount of it has this orange boundary shown. That boundary line shows the historic district registered with the National Register of Historic Places in 1995. That shows it has significance. It has significance not just because of that, but also because of the fact that it was designed by a very well-known the landscape designer. Now also in that town is St. Gertrude's Church, which was designed by John Theodore Combs, and it is also on the National Register because of its significance as a very good example of Romanesque revival architecture and being an example of a very good architect, a very well-known architect. That's John Theodore Combs. He was the architect. He was a Catholic and designed mostly Catholic churches. Now this is the town that was laid out by the architect of landscape, Frederick Law Olmsted. That's Frederick Law Olmsted, a good picture of him. And this is part of the town that he laid out. This is the mill over here in 1900. These stacks are from the open hearth furnaces that were used for making steel. And this is outside the factory. One day about 1915, showing the train, how important trains were for the factory because they were making heavy steel products, and being able to deliver this stuff by railway was important. These are some of the things in the factory that they were making. These are rolls of sheet steel, long sheets of steel that were rolled up and then bound together, probably a couple tons each. It was galvanized steel that they were making at first. They couldn't just sell steel plain because it would rust. They galvanized it with a coat of tin. These are some of the guys who worked there. Tough looking bunch, and if you worked there you would probably understand why. This shows the factory in relationship to the town. You see, the town was made so that the people could live close to where they were working. A little bit larger format here, and it shows that also close was a nice big stadium where you could have things going on. So it wasn't just work, it was, you could have entertainment and also, play. This is the big factory. This is a smaller factory called a foundry where they could make cast iron products. Municipal building and theater built for also, musical events and cultural events. There was also the library, the train station, the post office, showing the whole town, various houses within the town, and we go through some of the sites of Vandergrift, looking down Grant Street toward the factory. We get a look at the factory, and you won't find any company stores in there because they wanted to make this as a town where people could feel comfortable and have their own shops and stores, and they wouldn't be beholden to the factory owners. These are a bunch of the Greeks. The Greeks were the second largest national group, second after only the number of Italians. This is how the place had developed over the years. This is mapping in 1940, seeing it from the air. And the design caboose tells us that we've gone far enough. And we shut it down now, saying so long, and we'll see you again.